Good day, Internet folks. The other day I was thinking about people who feel like winning small is not considered winning. And I was wondering why that happens and how they end up in that position. And I was trying to reflect on my own behavior and my own emotions about why do I never celebrate winning or any achievement? Is it because I have never created or produced the durable amount of enough in my mind? Which concludes that I could be a perfectionist, and it is partially true. But what about the other people? Why do people who have lost a lot in their lives, they don't really necessarily feel winning? So my question is, why this happens? And I would love to talk about loss necessarily doesn't need to be something major. It can be small, and it only depends on the person. And it is not really our job to judge people for their loss. However, loss can affect people in many ways, and it can have that major impact in their lives. And it can lead to a point that people would not feel small wins would consider as wins. So there are actually a few papers on internet, and there are some few good articles on internet which are referenced about this topic. And there's some interesting things that I learned and I would love to share. So apparently every one of us have a reference point in our brain, and we compare everything to that reference point. So when a person loses a lot in life, they would compare their win, the size of the winning, to the size of the loss. And of course, if the size of the loss in their mind is big enough and winning is not that big, they would assume that winning doesn't matter, so there's no point for celebration or acknowledgement of it. The other thing that I learned is that reward can be muted in their brains. So a lot of people go through a lot of chronic stress and grief. And when we talk about chronic, we talk about something that is going on for a long time. And apparently, chronic stress and grief can decrease the anticipation and the feeling of enjoying or the feeling of rewarding yourself for the win. Which is interesting because an intellectual person can actually feel that something is good happening, but doesn't necessarily feel like that it deserves recognition. There's another part of it that is very interesting, and is that a lot of people trying to win to restore the past. So when they're trying to achieve something, they're not thinking about success, or they're not thinking about being happy for what they've done. They're trying to undo something that has happened in the past, so they have to achieve something that is equivalent to the loss. Which in this case, winning is associated with restoring. And there's another piece of information that is interesting, and that is that your nervous system can prioritize threat over winning. So after a while, after a long time of losing, your brain starts thinking and prioritizing what can be lost next, or what is going to be jeopardized next. So even part of you, when you are succeeding, is going to think something bad is going to happen. And that's the feeling that we might all have on a daily basis. Through loss, you start thinking that good things are not necessarily going to stay with you for a while. And that is the dangerous lesson that losing teaches you when you live. And it makes attachment to success feels risky. And it feels like if you're celebrating, you're disappointing yourself. And there's another angle that I was thinking about. If you're in a job or in a family that your achievements, your winning, small, big, doesn't matter, has been quiet and you have never shared about it, you learn as a person that it doesn't really matter if I celebrate. What is next? What is the next step? So you don't necessarily have to lose to get to the point that winning is not a satisfying feeling. However, when I personally look at other people and I see, wow, look at these people, they're like actually celebrating this or celebrating that. And I was like, well, if I compare a lot of things and I appreciate people and their achievements, everybody's working so hard, everybody's doing what they're doing. But when you look back at your own achievements, you realize that you're not really appreciating yourself, and you're not really thankful of what you've done. You're not even acknowledging all the effort and hard work that you have put into getting to this point. And that was the reason I had to dig into this concept, because I really needed to know, am I a perfectionist? Yeah. Am I a person who have lost a lot in their lives? Not a lot compared to a lot of people, but I do acknowledge all my loss. And I would like to share one last thing. And that is, if a person goes through all that, they would become extremely ambitious that it's very hard to satisfy. And that's how I think we all get to a point that our standards are going up and our boundaries are getting harder. And it makes it very hard for a lot of people to understand why it's happening. Well, I hope you all have a good day. And I see you later.